Hello, Steve White, Trickboy89 for SteveArts89. Not my first attempt at reviewing this episode. Okay, so we have your A and B story, sort of. We've got the crew encountering the New Federation and then going on a small mission to resolve an issue to prove their worth to that New Federation. So I'm just going to sort of refer that, I guess, to the A and B story. Now, the episode starts off with Saru and Michael standing at a window talking about, what are we going to find, just sort of excited and sort of speculating, what's going to happen with this meeting with the Federation, being back home and being back part of the Federation, not being alone anymore, all that. And then they go into this little bubble, and this bubble is created by all the ships. It's like a co-op or commune where all the ships are contributing power to create this distortion field to hide the whole group from anyone else, so they're hiding themselves. There's 38 members of the Federation, down from 350. Nan's race and Saru's race have both joined. They're very advanced, supposedly. Everything's really bright. It's actually the scene that we see with Adora. I know her name's not Adora, but I'm just going to call her Adora anyway, because it's easier to remember that than her actual name. And Michael and Saru beam on, and that's the scene in the set that I thought was a bunker, because it seems underground. It's like we couldn't afford to have the blue screen shots all the time, so we just created like these little areas with no windows or no nothing that we can film in, and then we've got our CGI shots, which are totally different. So it feels really claustrophobic. It doesn't feel consistent with the design. So they come in, they meet Commander Charles Vance, Commander-in-Chief, and Security Chief Lieutenant Weller. And the first sign of trouble is the fact that the person greeting them, the leader, is not a black woman, because every other community leader or planet leader or commander has been a black woman. So I'm like, oh, this is not good. He must be a bad guy, because why else would they allow a man to be in command? He must be evil or something. So I thought, this is going to be some Federation's turned evil. We're being absorbed by this evil entity. We have to escape them. And I thought, well, the rest of the season is going to be them like being chased by the Federation or something. And I had all these horrific visions. Fortunately, none of that happened. Basically, he doesn't trust them because, history says they were destroyed all those years ago and then they erased everything. So there's no history of them, so he doesn't know what to make of them. They explain themselves, they try and prove their worth. He basically says, yeah, we can't trust you people, we can't talk to you. We basically are just going to take a ship apart, take a crew apart, reassign people where we think they might be useful after they've been briefed and brought up to date. Like you can bring people up to date for 900 years in just like an hour session or something. I mean, one of the main problems with this season is them trying to establish a 31st century Federation that's believable. Now, had they just ended up in some random place in the 31st century and just been out exploring and dealing with dramas away from the Federation, it would have worked, because there'd be no issue of how do we depict a 31st century Federation that makes sense and make it work without looking ridiculous and also destroying future canon and putting an end date on Star Trek that is where it just goes bad. So, Michael, of course, is being Michael, and Michael explaining everything, and we find on the ship, because they've been, like you said at the end, they've been triaged for years. They're basically in survival mode. They're just putting out brush fires. They're looking at all the small issues. They're caught up in the small issues. They're overwhelmed by the small issues and the day-to-day management. They're not looking at the big picture, and they're not seeing the value of the crew, and they're not seeing the potential of the spore drive. It's so ridiculous. They're like, they should be like, oh my God, we're saved. We have a spore drive. We can go anywhere in the universe. We don't need warp anymore. We can reconnect with all everyone in the Federation we've lost contact with in a matter of minutes. We can just go from one place to the next place to the next place. We can basically fix the Federation. We can create another spore drive, because they can just make spores all over the place. They've got a whole planet that's been growing for 1,000 years somewhere full of them. So boom, the Federation's saved. Let's get to it. Instead, they're all, we need to take a ship apart and analyze it, and we're all limited and we can't see past anything. Michael, please save us. Please save us. Help us see the world and look up. So, of course, Michael proposes this because this alien race is dying, and he's like, well, if you can give us some information, we might better save them. And he looks at it like, right, bitch. Sorry, no, you're like archaic. I'm sorry, we got this. We can handle this. We're from the 31st century. Go back. Shut up. And it's nice to see Michael put in her place because she keeps Michael explaining everything like she knows anything in that era, and she does get slapped down, and it's good. But then she doesn't give up that easy because she is essentially right. Breaking up the crew and not utilising them and the Spore Drive and their whole unit like that is ridiculous. They need to make others and put together other crews that can go out and do what the Federation does best, now that they no longer have the issue of no warp. So she's determined to prove their worth, so she eventually bullies them into giving them the logs for that ship to find out where they've been and how the aliens got infected. So Michael basically is poised to save the day, but I forgot to mention something else, and it's a good thing I had to stop my video because I realised I skipped over something. Basically, they interrogate the crew, and it's kind of almost amusing because it's being done by holograms, and they are really obviously holograms. They have no people skills. They are really backwards. They're not even as advanced as original series or next generation AIs and holograms and stuff like that. It's just really bad. Moriarty was more complicated than these guys and more human-like, and he was an accident. So it's kind of amusing though because they're just having fun with them basically. And then we get to Giorgio. Now this is an interesting scene because David Cronenberg comes on and ends up interrogating her. She tries to interrogate him, and it kind of backfires where he reveals to her that when she left the Terran universe, it somehow started to distance itself from the universe that they're in, and we're still unsure if this is Discovery's separate universe or the earlier Prime universe from the JJ films, because it's certainly not the original Star Trek universe, thanks to licensing and politics and writers and agendas. It's a different universe. So what we know is somehow, and this doesn't make a lot of sense, the universes have gotten separate further away, and in 500 years they haven't had any contact with the mirror universe. And he stated that the Terran Empire had collapsed after she left. So she gets rattled by that. So the cockiness and cat and mouse thing that they have going for a while ends pretty much with that bit of information. We drops that bomb on her. And then back to the other story. Basically, Michael, and I've done this review twice now, and I can't remember what I said in which, so hopefully I'm not repeating myself. Michael basically is like, oh, they went to this planet. This planet had this ecological problem 1,000 years ago. Just by chance, 1,000 years ago this happened. So we need to go to that planet, basically. The AI pops up and basically says, oh, if I can get a sample of that plant before it was mutated by this problem, I can create a vaccine. So they're like, well, I just happen to know, because I'm Michael Burnham, I know of everything, I happen to know there was a seed ship floating around 1,000 years ago that had all the seeds from the Federation, so it'll have a seed from that will give us the sample we need. And of course, the ship is still around. It's being manned by families over time, because apparently it's just stuck where it is. And this is one of the parts of the story that's really stupid. Now they've got the Spore Drive, and they can go there. Why don't they just bring it back? They go to get the seed sample from the ship and bring it back, but they leave the ship out there being manned by a family all alone because there's no warp drive. They have the Spore Drive now. This ship is tiny. They could just put it in the it looks like they can put it in the shuttle bay and just bring it home, but they don't. They don't even talk about that. They just leave it there. So basically, they beam on this guy. His family and him were exposed by an EMC burst, and he was beaming into this seed chamber, and it just disrupted his matter, and now he's like from another dimension or something, so he's not quite on this plane, but he is. He's mourning his family. They're dead. They're in stasis, but he's in denial or something. But then because this is her race, says that basically they look at death differently, and it's not that simple, but they don't explain it. And she decides to actually stay behind because once they sort of get this guy to sort of get in touch with reality, they pull him out of the limbo he's in and explain to him that his family's basically dead. She decides to stay either with him to nurse him because he's going to die from his injuries, or to actually heal him, and stay and take on this obligation of taking care of this seed ship. And I'm like, why would you leave the seed ship out in the middle of nowhere where it's of no use, unattainable and vulnerable, when you could just bring it back to the Federation? Like, it doesn't make any sense. None of this episode makes any sense. The whole insertion of Discovery into this universe changes it and makes it make no sense, because it's like it hasn't changed anything. It's just really, it just doesn't work. So they get back, they solve the problem, and they prove to the Federation that they have use, that the Federation, they basically teach the Federation how to Federation, because now the Federation realizes, oh, we can look past our day-to-day problems, and we can actually look out and look up at the future and our potential now. We've basically been so caught up in all our little problems, we've forgotten how to be the Federation. But thank you, Mikey Spock, you've showed us how to be the Federation. So that happens, and no one can't leave without a Hail Michael moment. It's really disturbing. She's like, Michael, you're the greatest person ever. No one else can look for the best in people like you do. Don't ever stop being you. And they hug and cry, and then she leaves. And there's a nice shot, actually, of her looking out this window of all the plants at the Discovery disappearing. And you have moments where you think, wow, wouldn't it be nice if they had something like that on a Star Trek show? Because the worst part about Discovery is it reminds you sometimes, in moments when it feels almost like Star Trek, that they could do better. They could actually have a decent Star Trek series if they actually, tried or wanted to. And it makes you just miss Star Trek more and sort of resent the fact that we're not getting Star Trek, we're just getting this. So I'm not sure if I covered everything, because I did a review and it was too long, and then I did this one and I can't remember what I said before and what I said in the other video, so I hope I've covered everything. But it's not that complicated. They find the Federation, they teach the Federation how to Federation, they prove that they are valuable as a group, that they can save them, and they sort of have this one little mission that succeeds, but they don't seem to address the bigger picture, and it's probably because they either can't envision it or they just don't know how to deal with it because it's just too big. And that's the problem with going to the 31st century. They should have just gone to some random place in the 31st century where they'd interact with other species and have just this freedom of exploring the universe in the 31st century, and not have to deal with the Federation or any of the canon or chronology issues that now they're in the middle of, because they've created this like end point for Star Trek. And they're trying to depict the Federation in the 31st century, which, I mean, for them it amounts to floating decor and brighter lights and some different format of ships. That's it. That's the 31st century to them. That's 900 years of technological advancement to them. It was hard enough to realistically depict Star Trek 200-300 years from now. To try and do it like 11 or 12 or whatever 1,100 years, it just doesn't work. But I'm going to go before this gets too long. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think. I hope I remembered everything. Yeah, like I said, watching this show is kind of painful. It's like I was like just not wanting to deal with it. I just like laid down and like went to sleep for like 5 hours because I just didn't want to do it. 4 hours, I just didn't want to do it. And it's almost like being in an abusive relationship where you sort of know your abusive partner's coming home needing to get beaten, but you can't like get out of it. So you just have to like prepare for it. That's what being a Star Trek fan and watching Star Trek Discovery is like. So I've taken my beating for the week, and I've tried to make sense of it and make excuses for it. And it's just going to happen again next week. So I'm going to go. This was my review of Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 5, Die Trying, which I didn't mention at the start. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Bye.